So it's 10:30 and it's time to get started with our second session of the day in Energy Security and Green Infrastructure Week. Many thanks again to our sponsors, Cundall, Epicam and Vattenfall Heat UK for their support for the week. Just had a very interesting conversation kicking off our day on skills and diversity with a great discussion on ED&I. We're now going to move to focus on skills, and specifically skills for the energy economy, navigating the transition to net zero. And I'm sure that we're going to have a really good discussion here about the future of skills for the green economy, and also explore some innovative solutions, hopefully, to ensure that we get that well-equipped workforce that's ready to meet the challenges of a sustainable future. We've got two great speakers with us on the panel. We've got Rhys Morgan, the Strategic Projects Director for Skills and Inclusion at the Royal Academy of Engineering. And he will be talking about, amongst other things, the massive demand for probably more than 500,000 new jobs over the next 20 years as we move towards net zero, and we'll be discussing some of the skills that we're going to be needing and how that might change and reposition maybe the industry as well, and how it's seen going forward as well. We've also got with us Emma Thompson, who's the Executive Director of the Society of Operations Engineers, and she's going to be, amongst other things, highlighting the importance of upskilling and reskilling the workforce as key drivers of the net zero transition, an absolutely vital issue, which came up in a conversation that we had yesterday around where these new industries were moving into, shall we say, areas where you'd had different heavy industries in the past, and there was a real need for retraining and upskilling. And it's actually a really important part of that just transition that's absolutely essential if we're going to get public buy-in to this whole area as well, because if we don't get that right, then that could lead to all sorts of all sorts of stuff, which I won't go into now, which is much wider than net zero, all kinds of stuff around the threats of net zero and all the rest of it. So I think it's an area that we absolutely get right, and I know that Emma's going to talk a little bit about that, some of the challenges ahead, and also discuss various strategies that can be employed, to basically ensure that we get the workforce that we need going forward. Anyway, that's enough from me. Our first speaker, as I said, is Rhys Morgan, Strategic Projects Director for Skills and Inclusion at the Royal Academy of Engineering. Now, I know doing some fantastic work in this area as well. So, Rhys, the floor's yours.
Thank you, Andy. Good morning, everybody. Yes, as Andy said, I'm the Education and Skills Strategic Director for Skills and Inclusion at the Academy. And I've been looking into the issue around the jobs for the net zero economy for the past 5 or 6 years. And I'm afraid that I have to say the picture, I think, is pretty bleak. No doubt over the last few days you've been covering issues that are going to impact progress for net zero to meet for the UK to meet its net zero challenges, and I'm sure you've covered things like planning and investment, regulation, and so on. But I think once those are addressed, I'm in no doubt that the rate limiting step for the UK to meet its net zero ambitions will be the skills base to be able to deliver it. We are simply put, we are not producing nearly enough engineers and technicians to meet current demand, let alone the expected growth in the net zero sectors, as you mentioned, Andy, in the opening statement. I don't want to bamboozle the audience with too many numbers at the very start of this session, but let me give you a few to illustrate. So there are about 30 million people working in the UK, and 6.5 million of those work in construction, engineering, and IT related roles. We do this analysis with something we call the engineering footprint of jobs, and that's an agreed set of jobs that we define between the Royal Academy of Engineering, the Engineering Council, the regulator for engineering profession, and Engineering UK, a body that does a lot of analysis for UK engineering skills. And we look at the Office for National Statistics data on the current workforce, and we identify those jobs. And from that, we get around about 6.5 million, which is about 20% of the UK's workforce. It's a huge number. And so when we look at where these jobs are going to come from, where the future jobs are going to come from, and look at the future demand, we can do some fairly basic kind of calculations. So let's assume, for example, that people working in the UK have a 50-year working life. That's the ages of 20 to 70. Sadly, a reality for younger generations coming through. And let's assume that there are no losses within that time period. So we essentially have a uniform top hat distribution of those skills. So people stay in those jobs from age 20 to 70. We could do a fairly simple sum and just divide that 6.5 million by the 50 years. And it gives us an understanding of what the kind of steady state demand is just to replace retirement. And that number comes out at about 130,000 people. So we need 130,000 new skills, new people every year to replace our retiring workforce. Now, we also know that the reality is that people retire early and there's an aging workforce in the UK. So it's not a simple distribution. There are actually more people leaving engineering than that basic assumption makes. But we have about 130,000 people that we need to replace every year. When we look at the current education skills supply pipeline, that includes apprenticeships, technical qualifications at level 2, at level 3, BTECs, T-levels, and then moving into higher education, undergraduate degrees in engineering, in construction, in IT, and even capturing some of the postgraduate people as well. We currently achieve around about between 105 and 110,000 people. So we're not actually meeting our steady state demand as it currently is. Now, as you mentioned, Andy, in the opening there, we're looking at about 500,000 people over the next 15 to 20 years. So that will add an extra demand of around 25,000 people just for the green economy, just for the net zero economy. And of course, there are other parts of the economy expanding as well. The government has ambitions around advanced technologies, compound semiconductors, quantum technologies, future telecom systems, and things like that. So we are in a critical state. And then just to kind of a final point, when we look at the trend data, it's actually going the wrong way. There have been declines in the number of people starting apprenticeships over the past 7 years. There are declines in critical disciplines like electrical engineering, which are going to be absolutely vital for the net zero transition. And by and large, there's a kind of stagnation of people coming through the higher education system studying engineering and construction-based technologies. Very final point to finish off, and we'll get into this in our discussion, I'm sure. The government has established various task forces. The previous government had the Green Jobs Delivery Group, the Nuclear Skills Task Force. I see Alex is on the session later on this afternoon. Did a great job with the National Nuclear Skills Task Force. But there are other task forces as well. And there's very little in the way of coordination. And essentially, no one is looking at how to grow the pie. They're all looking at how to take a bigger slice of the existing pie. And so there's a really fundamental challenge here, and we have to link it to the industrial strategy. We need a national workforce skills strategy around engineering and technology skills to grow this talent base for meeting our net zero ambitions. I'll pause there, as I'm sure there'll be lots to discuss. Thank you.
Thanks, Rhys. Just clarify one point, because it's just come up. You mentioned a number of new people to replace the retiring workforce, and you gave us a figure. Was that for engineering only?
Or that's across engineering, construction, and IT-based roles. So it's
right.
The
engineering. And that figure
engineering
again, I think you said 130 million.
130,000 per year. Beg your pardon.
130,000, right?
Yeah.
Okay, okay, right, yeah. How can it be 130 million? No, not unless we became a bigger country. Okay, that's
Yeah.
great. Thanks for that. Yes, we will explore many of those issues, I'm sure, in the discussion in a second. But first of all, we've got our next speaker, which is Emma Thompson, who is going to explore some of the issues around upskilling, which I think are very, very important as well. And I'm sure she'll have some very interesting perspectives on that in her role as executive director of the Society of Operations Engineers. So, Emma, over to you.
Thank you, Andy. First and foremost, just to say that I've been in the industry for around 21 years in engineering, and that's both as in a professional engineering institution as well as working with an engineering organisation on engineering projects. And I would like to talk a little bit about how engineering skills are, we need to keep them up with the pace at which we're innovating towards net zero. And first and foremost, engineering skills are highly transferable. And quoting Neil Young, who is a Global Engineering Capability Director at Babcock International, all engineering skills are transferable as the principles are universal. Certification may be different across sectors. For example, different between nuclear regulations, roadworthiness, or aircraft worthiness, but it can be taught. It's physics and mathematics that mostly about turning a problem into a solution, as well as solving those problems. It's also about monitoring and identifying inefficiencies, as well as reduction of wastage of resources and energy. And referring to another paper on green industrial skills for sustainable future, this defines green skills as the knowledge, abilities, values, and attitudes needed to live in, develop and support a sustainable and resource efficient society. It takes a step to further develop and define green skills, as well as the skills needed by the workforce in all sector levels, in order to help adaptation of products, services, processes to the transformations due to climate change and to the environmental requirements and regulations. The paper also lists 4 groups of work tasks that are important for green occupations, which are engineering technical skills, science skills, operations management skills, and monitoring skills. We see the likes of Jaguar Land Rover, JLR, and Unilever and Diageo developing innovative decarbonation and energy efficient measures for their production facilities as they work on realising their renewable strategies. While Jaguar Land Rover's work is around boosting their self-generated energy capacity from solar solutions, Diageo is aiming to eliminate fossil fuel use from brewing operations. Unilever highlights heat pumps as crucial technology to achieve 100% renewable thermal energy. These are some of the many innovations shaping the skills landscape. Looking at the pace we're advancing, the skills needed for the future are multidimensional. For example, it's not just about owning in on one specific skills, but amalgamating your technical and human skills to yield the best outcome. Upon analysing the landscape, speaking to leaders and referencing literature, we've identified a number of hard and soft skills that the modern engineer will need to take us into the future. The hard skills being machinery, learning and AI, data analysis as businesses invest in advancing metering technologies to report their carbon footprint. While technical skills such as the above are critical, they need to be married with softer skills that make us all human and foster a collaborative and innovative workforce. Across my conversations and research, I've come across applications such as resilience to face the unknown, willingness to learn new skills, confidence to try new things, leadership to make decisions, and attitude and work ethics. Design thinking, creativity, adaptability, and empathy were also listed as necessary skills for the future by the Green Industrial Skills paper I referred to earlier. While technical skills can be taught, attributes as an attitude, leadership, work ethics, etc., can be obtained or published through CPD and professional registration. Being a member of an engineering institution also exposes engineers to a network of professionals and experts who can part their wisdom and provide direction as they map their career pathway ahead. And then you may then say, well, what skills challenges are coming up in your discussions with other senior leaderships working in the sector? So from the perspective of business leaders, it's all about future-proofing their businesses. And that spans from across talent attraction, value chain, and brand image, etc. So talent attraction, having the right people with a relevant skill set is crucial to protecting the bottom line and for sustainable revenue generation. For example, the KPMG survey shows that environmental, social and governance, ESG, is a key attribute to millennials looking for when choosing where to work, or should I say who they work for, as it's down to shared value or value alignment. And then talent retention. Attracting talent is only half the battle here. Once skilled professionals enter the engineering sector, retaining them can not just be as challenging. A large number of workers leave their roles within the first few years, often citing poor onboarding experiences, a lack of career progression opportunities, as well as primary reasons for moving on. Retention is further hindered by a lack of recognition and support within many organisations. To lower turnover rates, companies need to create work environments that foster growth, provide continuous feedback, as well as align their missions with larger societal goals, such as sustainability and innovation. From businesses' perspective, it's the willingness to invest in training programs and initiatives to retrain existing staff or returning staff. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Emma. A lot to unpick there, and we will unpick it during the course of this following discussion. Just a reminder to the audience to post any questions in the questions box indicated by a speech bubble, I think, on your screen with a question mark in it. So if you've got anything, throw them in there, any points, any questions, and I'll pose them to our two panelists. I'm going to go back, though, first to Rhys and something he said around that we were going to need upwards of 500,000 new jobs over the next 20 years around the whole transition to the green economy and net zero. Simple question, really, but probably not a simple answer, or maybe it is. Where are the people going to come from to meet this new demand? Rhys, what's your answer to that? You're on mute.
Thank you. Sorry, of course I am. Yes, it is a simple question. The answer, without question, is going to be more complicated. It's going to be a mixture. We absolutely have to increase the number of young people coming through the education system who will progress towards careers in engineering and construction and IT-based roles that support the net zero transition. And I just wanted to pick up on something Emma said around green jobs and green skills. I find this profoundly unhelpful these terms. When you really unpick green jobs, they are, the vast majority are engineering and manufacturing jobs. Heat pump installers, solar panel technicians, civil engineers erecting the foundations of a nuclear power station or an offshore wind turbine. There's this kind of messaging, the narrative coming from government around, what green skills and green jobs. And actually, it's misleading for young people. It's misleading for parents, for businesses, for policymakers to think that there is a thing called a green job or a green skill. And actually, it's going to be unhelpful in terms of that supply pipeline. We need to be much more clear with young people that the green jobs economy, the economy where green jobs are all engineering and manufacturing by and large. Of course, there are some related to biodiversity, agriculture, and environmental science and so on. But actually, the vast majority, 90%, if not more, will be in those engineering and technician roles. So we need to do much more to encourage young people. But actually, the work starts now. National Grid is already upgrading its infrastructure for decarbonising the energy system. Hinkley C, Sizewell, we are building these nuclear power stations now. We are already finding ourselves needing engineers and technicians. So we can't just wait for primary school children to work through the system and secondary school children. So we need to look at how we can attract people from other sectors of the economy. So taking them from perhaps retail sectors where there's declines or other parts of the economy, and look at how we reskill them. So things like boot camps, the government's program for reskilling, are good for lower level skills, certainly for where you have level 2 apprentices, level 3 type roles, where you can put someone on a fairly quick training program, get them up to speed. Those are really valuable. But we also need to look at how we can do that for higher level skills as well, level 4 or 5 advanced, higher technicians, and graduate roles. It can be done, and you can take people from cognate disciplines like chemistry, even possibly biology, maybe a bit more tricky, but you can certainly look at how you might upskill people from those kind of with those kind of backgrounds into engineering type roles. So that's the first thing. And then the other thing, and I know it's not something that people don't like to talk about, and certainly governments of both colours, is immigration. We are going to need to bring in more people from overseas to meet some of these roles. The Home Secretary challenged the Migration Advisory Council. It's the council that advises them on migration statistics, and they said, why are engineering and manufacturing companies and IT companies among the highest to recruit from overseas? And the simple answer is, we don't have the skills base here in the UK. So it has to be part of the mix going forward.
Okay, thanks, Rhys, for that. I just want to turn to Emma, kind of flowing from some of the points that Rhys was making there. What skills challenges, specific ones, are coming up in your discussions with other senior leaders working in this sector? Are there some that are more acute than others? What might they be?
So there are, apart from what I touched on earlier on talent retention and attraction, there is EDI. And I know, Andy, you mentioned you covered that earlier, but the number of women working in engineering, for example, and technology has dropped by 38,000 from 16.5% in 2022, the workforce, to 15.7% in 2023. The fall in women in engineering and technology workforce is driven by a fall of 66,000 between the ages of 35 to 64, indicating that women are not being retained. I think a more diverse workforce brings a wider range of perspective and problem-solving approaches, which is critical for innovation. Yet, despite this well-documented benefit, the sector continues to struggle with creating environments that are welcoming to all. the challenge lies not only in attracting diverse talent, but also retaining it, ensuring that everyone has equal opportunities for advancement. And what Rhys stated earlier, it might be pulling from different sectors to try and realign them, get them the training they needed to fill these gaps that we have.
Yeah, I think we did have some conversation around that, but I think it's germane to a lot of the conversations that we've actually been having. I think this whole concept of how do we make the sector in its broadest sense, and maybe don't just talk about engineering. That's not. I mean, I write a hell of a lot about engineering in some of the things that I do, and I'm a massive fan of the role of engineering within society. I think it gets into every aspect and every facet of life, and I think we need to find different and more exciting ways, or promote the exciting ways that engineering is changing people's lives, because it actually is. You can't fail to look at whether it's a major engineering infrastructure project or some of the intricate engineering that goes in around digital projects and all the rest of it, to see that that, as I'm sure you two are aware, that there are just some fantastic stories around that. But turning to Rhys, is it the case that maybe, rather than just dwelling on, because I know Rhys has said a couple of times, we shouldn't just alight on this term green jobs, is it the case that we need to rethink the skills system in order to present the industry in a different way in this whole context around net zero and achieving a transition?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. That's a good question. I mean, I think we need to apply a kind of a systems thinking lens to this challenge. It's multifaceted. It's deeply entrenched in our education system, and the fact that the vast majority of these roles that we're talking about are technician type roles that will be needed to support the net zero economy and our energy transition, and yet we still have prejudices within our education system, driven by kind of the national conversation, really. It's in our culture that we want young people to go to university and not have technical careers. So there's definitely something that needs to be discussed there. But actually, taking that systems lens, we can go right back to the school system. We can see that there are shortages of teachers in mathematics, in physics, in computing, in design and technology in our schools. So young people are not even getting a very good experience of these subjects and the kind of occupations, the kind of careers that might come from them. So a third of the schools in the country have no specialist physics teacher. So their physics lesson usually involves a substitute teacher coming in, perhaps the PE teacher, perhaps the music teacher, someone else, asking the pupils to open their books at page 27 and copy out the next 4 pages. That is their physics lesson. That's not inspiring. That's not engaging. That's not going to make anyone think about careers that require or involve physics in the future. We're seeing a decline in the number of young people taking design and technology in school. Design and technology is the one opportunity to have practical hands-on making in your education, and yet we're seeing the numbers drastically decline over the last 10-15 years, and this is driven partly by what we think is national policies around academies, multi-academy trusts, and academization of schools. Academies don't have to follow the national curriculum, and so they look at design and technology, say these workshops are taking up a lot of space, they require capital equipment, they require consumables, they're expensive, they're dangerous, there's health and safety issues here, there's safeguarding matters. Let's get rid of that. Let's allow the children to do art and design instead. And so we're seeing a depletion of that subject in schools. Computing, we can look at assessment. So GCSEs currently in computing, there's no programming on a computer. The students, the pupils, literally have to write a program on a piece of paper in an exam hall in the gym in a hot June Wednesday afternoon. That is the education and the assessment that they're having to go through. So these things are, there's many aspects of our education system that we need to address. Then we move into the post-16 education system. We talked about the decrease in apprenticeships. There's a real problem with apprenticeship provision. The number of young people wanting to do apprenticeships is not met by the supply. But then we have technical education in colleges. Colleges are underfunded. We have T-levels, the new qualifications that have been brought in by the previous government to simplify the qualification system. And yet there are real problems with those as well. For example, part of the T-level qualification is a 45-day work placement, and employers are just not offering those work placements to young people, and understandably so. To take a young person, a 17-year-old, onto an engineering manufacturing facility where, again, there are health and safety issues, the increased insurance for the employer, all the sorts of kind of paperwork, safeguarding, all those things. It's an administrative burden, it's a cost, it's a drop in productivity because they have to have someone looking after that young person throughout the time. These are real challenges that we need to address. So to say, yes, we need to change the perception of engineering and that's going to solve the problem, it's just not. We have to do all of those things, and we need to really understand all the barriers to that progression.
Thanks, Rhys. Got a question here around, I can't remember which one of you mentioned it now, but about how we needed an industrial strategy to meet the predicted workforce demand going forward. I'm going to ask this for Emma first, and I'll come to you, Rhys. I mean, what, from your perspective, would be the key points of such a strategy to ensure that we meet the massive amount of people needed to meet net zero? Because we're going to need them, and we probably won't achieve net zero without them. So what should be the key points in that strategy? Are the government listening? And if they're not, how do we get the government to listen? A lot there, but anyway, that's why you're here. Emma, what's your view on that?
I think the person that asked the question was referring to the point when I mentioned about the Green Industrial Skills for a Sustainable Future paper. And it was talking about, that we need to take a step to further define green skills, the skills needed by the workforce. And again, as Rhys said, it's all skills at all different levels. And we need to, I think, yes, maybe we need to table to government that, things are moving on, they're transforming, and we need to make this change in order for our environment and regulations. But it's also maybe using examples of some of the companies I named earlier, Jaguar, for example, all the work that they're doing and all the changes that they've made. It's almost as if they've done it as normal business needs, and I think this needs to be made into normality. It shouldn't just be, oh, we need to go green. It should be in everyday life. And what we should perhaps be tabling to government is saying this should be in the same order as providing office furniture. It's another task, yes, but it's contributing to our environment to make a difference.
Shall I? Andy, you're on mute.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I just want to bring Emma back in just on one point before I bring you in, Rhys. I will bring you back in. And from what you were saying there, Emma, it kind of speaks to me again about this whole area of being joined up. I know that you've got a number of specialist sectors in your organisation, ranging from road transport to environmental. Are they coming together to work together better to tackle these skills challenges? Because it seems to me like there needs to be more joined upness in all of this, really, and not just picking on one particular area. Is that something that you're encouraging?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have, as you said, we've got 5 specialist sectors, and this is ranging from IRTE, Institute of Road Transport Engineers, to IPLANT, Institution of Plant Engineers, to BES, which is Bureau of Engineer Surveyors, and we also cover environmental and operations. but a lot of the time we cross-contaminate all our professional sectors, because there is a wide range of technologies and a breadth of application that vary in these sectors. The race towards net zero is very high on everyone's agenda, while innovations such as AI, machine learning, predictive analytics often offer new opportunities for efficiency and growth. They also pose challenges. Many companies are struggling to integrate these technologies in their operations, often because their workforces lack the necessary skills, or because their businesses, the business models are not agile enough to accommodate rapid change. This situation creates paradox where the very technologies that could drive the sector forward are also contributing to its struggles. Each sector for example, the Society of Operations Engineers represents its own professional sector committee. And these are comprised of seasoned engineers bringing ideas rooted from decades of work experience to young professionals who are amongst the first to access and experiment with innovative technologies like AI and machine learning. The work of each professional sector committee ranges from influencing policymakers in partnership with the likes of Engineering Council, Engineering UK, Royal Academy of Engineering, as well as other stakeholders such as DVSA and BSI setting standards. We also have an active network of volunteers who conduct a range of activities to educate schools and universities as well as parents. We're currently working closely with regional skills task groups to shape initiatives to encourage more engagement in STEM. And to support these efforts, we've recently launched a career pathway guide curated by experts in our sectors, featuring real life stories and career maps of those who have been there and done it. We're seeing engineering directors and training managers use it to do their own internal career planning, as well as school teachers, university lecturers, and career advisors. But on top of these, we're working closely with our current members and their organisations to understand their hiring and retention challenges, and developing content and toolkits to educate their workforce. One big aspect of this is professional registration, which is something that all our sectors are working together on to raise awareness across their respective specialisms. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma. Just throwing that back to Rhys, and sorry to interrupt earlier on, that question that we had around the key points in that industrial strategy, and maybe amplifying some of those points.
Yeah, thank you. This is the first time we've had an industrial strategy for many years. The previous government was quite clear it didn't want to pick winners, I think was the phrase it often used. I mean, this wasn't even about picking winners, it's about picking the races that we should be in. And I think the new government has come out with its industrial strategy for the UK. It's identified 8 growth driving sectors, including advanced manufacturing, clean energy, defense, digital, creative industries, life sciences, and so on. And there are a lot of strengths in the UK, that without question. You know, we are among the very top research universities in the world. We have a significantly higher number of publications than our next competitors, and citation rates, but we're not as good as we could be at translating that foundational research, fundamental research, into innovation. And I think we need to do a lot better at that. But that's not to say we're not doing too badly. You know, we have the 3rd largest venture capital market in the world. You know, we forget, we talk about the UK as a kind of post-industrial economy. It's not the case. We are still among the top 10 manufacturing nations in the world. 50% of the UK's exports are manufactured goods. You know, so there's a lot of things that we do well. But a key thing for me with the industrial strategy is that you have to align other government policies, other government department policies with that strategy. And so that comes to the education point. If we think that those 8 growth sectors are going to be pivotal for UK prosperity, then we need to ensure that young people are getting a good education that aligns to those and that kind of enables them to see career opportunities in those areas, because that's the way we're going to drive people into these sectors.
Another question here as well. We often talk about, we don't, we need to encourage things like apprenticeships, because actually not everything comes down to, university trained people. However, it may be, well, it probably is the case that some of the skills needed, when you're getting really down into the weeds of deep power system analysis and stuff like that, you're not going to learn those skills, according to one of our attendees, Elizabeth De Silva. She says you won't learn those skills in a boot camp. So what are the efforts that are going to be done to increase fairly urgently the number of people going to university or technical schools and colleges to get trained in skills like that? Because they'll need to be trained by people who've already got those skills self-evidently, and you won't just be able to get those people from overseas, because every other country on the planet is facing that challenge as well. So I'm going to start with you, Rhys. What's your view on that? How do we kind of encourage that, or is that just part of the severe challenge that we face?
So I think, it's a really good question, and I think it comes back to that industrial strategy. So, for example, I mentioned earlier, there are about 25-ish thousand UK students studying engineering degrees each year. Within that group, there will be a group doing electronic and electrical engineering, and so power electrical engineering is a subset of about 6,000 people. It's about 3,000 people a year. So we are graduating about 3,000 people a year in electrical engineering. And the vast majority of those are going into high power energy sector, distribution, and so on. But if we are to increase the number, and that number has been going down over the past 10 to 15 years from about 7,000 or 8,000 back in 2010. So if we're going to increase that, this is where an industrial strategy and a workforce skills strategy will come into play. So we should be incentivizing, the government should be incentivizing, maybe reducing the tuition fees for those kind of roles that are going to be important for the UK's ambitions. So maybe offering ways of paying off those tuition fees if those people go into the engineering sector instead of perhaps drifting off into management consulting or financial services. So there are ways of incentivizing people using market forces to using supply and demand forces, paying people effectively, to increasing bursaries, things like that. So driving people who may be within the kind of STEM world but not quite sure whether to do chemistry or physics, and trying to get them to move into a similar discipline like electrical engineering, where they've already done physics, mathematics at university, getting them to go into engineering. But you might have to go back earlier in the system as well and look at how you encourage more people to do A levels in physics and mathematics and so on. But there's probably a job also for universities to do to relax their entry rules and maybe say, okay, you don't need physics A level to come and do an electrical engineering degree. We'll teach you the electrical engineering, the physics you need, but we need people who can demonstrate a kind of broader level of academic abilities, and we'll teach you the specifics that you need on your degree.
Just kind of flowing from that as well, is there a role for for business and the industry to actually support education more and in its work with maybe some of the those technical colleges nationwide that we have? Is that something that you're aware of, Emma? Is it something that your organisation is encouraging at all?
So we do heavily encourage it, and I think it's more about the individual becoming a member of a professional engineering institution or similar. I mean, the SOE is a licensed member of the Society for the Environment and awards charter status to members. And what this does is, as well as charter status, it also we also give, as well as technical and practitioner and incorporated titles. So it's not as if you have to go straight in at chartered. There are other levels that you can go in at. But SOE, you know, by becoming a registered engineer with a, you know, professional registered engineer, whichever level you go in at, it puts one miles ahead of their peers, as their work experience and knowledge is being verified by a credible third party, but it also proves that they are committed to the statement of ethical principles, which was jointly created by Engineering Council and the Royal Academy of Engineering. It outlines 4 fundamental principles for ethical behaviour and decision making. And we break those up into honesty and integrity. So engineering professionals have a duty to uphold the highest standard of professional conduct, including openness, fairness, honesty, and integrity. Respect for life, law, and the environment and public good. For engineering, professionals have a duty to obey all applicable laws and regulations and give due weight to facts, publish standards and guidance for the wider public interest. Accuracy and rigour. Engineering professionals have a duty to acquire and use wisely the understanding, knowledge and skills needed to perform their role. Leadership and communication. Engineering professionals have a duty to abide by and promote high standards of leadership and communications. And if we just go by, for example, the Society for the Environment's Code of Professional Conduct, it outlines some really key points here. Act in accordance with the best principles for the mitigation of environmental harm and the enhancement of environmentally quality. And, you know, another key point I'll just say is using the individual skills and experience to serve the needs for the environmental and society as general. Thank you.
Can I also just jump in there,
Yeah,
Andy?
go on, Rhys, go on.
Yeah, so just to respond to this question about industry involvement in education, I think it has to be the case. You know, it has to be a partnership between government, industry, employers, and education providers. We know the state of the public purse. You know, we know that finances are stretched, and the education system is in a very, very challenging state. We know engineering, we know industry needs these skills, and we know that education providers and their students and lecturers will benefit from the latest cutting edge engineering activity. You know, and that will inspire young people as well. So the more we can get industry working collaboratively as well, so not in competition with each other, but working collaboratively so that we can reach, you know, all schools in the country. There are 5,500 secondary schools in the country, 20,000 primary schools. No one organisation like the SOE or the Royal Academy of Engineering can wrap our arms around that. It's just too big. But if we can work collectively and collaboratively to reach young people and explain to them the high-paid, exciting career opportunities that there are, really creative, amazing problem-solving, you know, the stuff that engineers do, stuff that's happening in the green sector, in the kind of net zero kind of sectors, are just phenomenally exciting. Much better than kind of working behind a desk in a bank in Canary Wharf. Who wants to do that? So boring. So actually, you know, working together to encourage young people, and then also in colleges and in universities, get the best out of those students so they can be really industry ready when they leave their education, so they can hit the ground running. Has to be a way forward.
I think that's a good point to finish on, because we have run out of time, as we always do. And I think I'm reminded of, I think it was something that Emma said earlier. I think it was Emma, about the one of the big drivers for a lot of millennials in particular is ESG, and the difference that you can make in your day-to-day work. And there's no doubt in my mind, and I'm sure there's no doubt in your mind, that the difference you can make working in this sector is absolutely phenomenal. I always used to tell the story about, in relation to engineering, about there's not many professions, maybe other than a heart surgeon or other important medics, where you can say they actually, left something behind, almost in perpetuity, although obviously people don't live forever, so maybe medics don't fit in with that one. But, whether it's a bridge, whether it's, an innovative infrastructure development, in relation to this issue, you're actually safeguarding the world for hopefully long after you've gone. And I think we need to raise people's sights. In my view, green jobs should be given in every part of employment. It's a mindset that needs to be addressed so that everyone considers that every job is working towards a net zero future. Because if we don't have a net zero future, we don't have a future. And I think if we look at it like that, then things start to actually slot into place. I'd just like to thank Emma and Rhys for their insights in this session. We could have gone on for a lot longer, but unfortunately time has defeated us. We're going to reconvene at 11:30 for our final session of Energy Security and Green Infrastructure Week, when we'll be looking at skills development in a sector that we've been talking about earlier in the week, and that's the nuclear power sector. So do join us at 11:30, where I'll be joined by a couple of panelists who will discuss that issue going forward. But for now, I'd just like to thank again our two panelists, Emma Thompson and also Dr. Rhys Morgan, very much indeed for their contributions this morning. We'll see you all again at 11:30. For now, see you in a bit.